Andreas Christou, thanks for coming on the podcast. Could you please begin with an introduction of who you are and a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, thank you for having me on, Owen. It's a true honor. So, I'm a movement specialist, a nutritionist, and a lifestyle optimization coach. And my focus is on optimizing people's lifestyles around their exercise and nutrition so they can get the most, benefit from those other two pillars of health. Because oftentimes we think of just exercise and nutrition as two of the most important things when it comes to health, overall well-being, weight loss, looking good, feeling good, and so on. But we forget many other aspects of life. That what are we doing those 23 other hours around our training, and how is our nutrition impacting our quality of life? So this is kind of what I do. I'm from Cyprus. I'm 28 years old, and I have a huge passion for helping individuals find their true potential. And this is what I do for a living.
Yeah, awesome. Could you add maybe a bit more about your personal health journey? Did you ever have a point where you were really kind of unwell and you're like, oh, I've got to fix this? Or well, how was that? How did that go?
Yeah, so I can start from when I was super young. When I was 14 years old, I wasn't necessarily, let's say, unwell. I was just obese, overweight, and that was something that bothered me mainly mentally. I didn't feel so much physical symptoms because I was still so young. I was 14 years old, so I hadn't developed any aches and pains in my joints yet, or didn't notice that any, cognitive decline or anything like that. So, or brain fog, let's say, or I didn't know if I had at the time because I had nothing to compare to. And as I grew older, of course, it's so easy to forget about how you felt back then, because as your life improves, you just simply forget how crap you felt like, because life just feels, more meaningful. It's almost as if when you overcome something hard in your life, it becomes, wiped away, and your body doesn't even remember that anymore. So you don't even remember the symptoms. But when people are older, they embed those pain symptoms way easier into their body. But yeah, it's kind of, I started when I was 14, and I started training in a gym. I lost all the weight basically that was keeping me captive mentally, and I started to feel free in my body. And that was kind of like the first time in my life where I felt that I was taking charge of my body and my health. But slowly over time, I started to realize that there is just so much more than to looking good, because that doesn't necessarily mean that you feel good. So I actually developed the body of my dreams that I wanted. I lost all the weight, and I even gained a good amount of muscle mass. So I have a very good foundation and knowledge on that, on body transformation. But there are many ways to actually achieve body transformation. There are healthy ways and unhealthy ways. And I did it in a very unhealthy manner. So I was just calorie restricting a lot. I was doing excessive cardio. I was overtraining. I even overtrained myself when I was 16 years old, to a point where I couldn't get out of bed. Like all my muscles were cramping because I was so deficient in nutrients, because I didn't know so much about nutrition back then. So I didn't focus so much on the vitamins and minerals. I was eating high protein, high carbohydrates, low fat, so traditional bodybuilding style diet. And this led to me, developing a couple of issues, which I slowly addressed with supplements. So they took me so far to a certain point. We kind of like patched the problem, for a couple of years. But then afterwards, I started to realize that, okay, now I don't have overtraining, but I just feel that I don't feel optimal inside my body, even though I have a good physique. And I'm here, teaching and preaching people of how to supposedly be healthy and, transform their body. And I was thinking that automatically means that they will feel good. But I realized that that's not the case. You have to address the other areas of life. So that's what let me dive deeper. And because my partner Tina, she also had an autoimmune condition, and so we actually managed to cure that. We managed to get over it completely, and now she doesn't have any symptoms at all. And so we managed to do that through fasting and through changing the light environment, what kind of light we are exposed to, and also trying a variety of different diets. We were both plant-based at some point. She was plant-based her whole life. I was plant-based only for 5 years. And then as soon as we both switched to more of an animal-based style diet, which is what I call now more of an ancestrally appropriate diet, because this is what our early ancestors ate. Basically, they hunted and gathered their food. This is when I started to witness like true healing and feeling in vitality, because I did not know what vitality actually meant until that point. Because to be in vitality is to have excess energy, meaning that you have more energy than what you actually need. So that means that all your cells have the energy to do the functions that they actually need to do on daily life. All your hormones and everything, your brain, your organs, everything is having the energy that it needs, and you have a little bit excess energy. And that is when you have vitality, because that means you have room to make mistakes. Meaning, for example, you can eat an ice cream and you can get away with it. You can like party one night and you won't feel like crap the next day. Like all of this kind of stuff. That doesn't mean that it's optimal to do those things. It just means that you have this capacity now where you have built your health so good that now you have room to make errors. And what we call these days is live life in balance, which I don't necessarily agree with. We can get into that a little bit deeper in the further down the line.
Yeah, sure. So you said you were kind of restricting calories, quite high carbs, and yeah, overtraining yourself. How does that kind of compare to your routine now?
So now I'm training way less. My training is way more smart. So I'm all about doing less to get more. This is how I operate. So I try to keep my exercise very intense. I try to do as much exercise outdoors as possible. Of course, I don't think that having a home gym or gyms in general, I don't think that they're necessarily a problem if they have good lighting environment. So meaning that they're not so much filled with fluorescent lighting. If you're protecting your skin with long clothes, if you're wearing blue light blocking glasses, I believe that there is a value in this, right? You have to have somewhere to go and resistance train your body, because nothing beats resistance training when it comes to, free weights. You can do so much with your body, but when you can meet your body where it's at, because most people are so weak these days, dumbbells and free weights and machines allow you to meet you where you are at. So that means that you can actually get into it way quicker and progress way faster. How I see it in terms with the light environment and the electromagnetic fields is so that it's all about the accumulative effect. So meaning that if you spend the majority of your time indoors under artificial lighting and close to electromagnetic fields, non-native electromagnetic fields, this is going to be a huge stressor on your body. And then if you go and train under, fluorescent lights in a gym, stressing your body more, you're constantly putting your body in this sympathetic overdrive, and you're just basically cramping your body. It's not necessarily like a good thing, because the rest of your lifestyle is not supporting, you can't get away with that, as I mentioned previously. And so the thing is that the most ideal thing for those kinds of people to do would be to, build a home gym where you can have circadian appropriate lighting, or even build it under like a shelter outdoors in your garden and you can get that natural light. Or even if you don't necessarily want to use weights at all or any equipment, you can just use your body weight, because your body is like the greatest gym that exists. You can do absolutely everything with it. You can do sprints, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups. You can do air squats. There's just so much stuff out there that you can do. So there's literally no excuses when it comes to training. So I kind of lost my train of thought. What was your original question?
How you were kind of training and living back when you were younger compare with how you're doing it now?
Yeah, so now of course the diet is totally different to back then. Now I'm totally high fat, high protein as well. So it's just high quality protein, high fat, basically zero carb. I do a carnivore diet at the moment. I'm gonna see how far I can take it, without getting any, let's say, I wouldn't say symptoms. It's not like you necessarily need to get symptoms by doing something so restrictive. It's just that sometimes when you exercise or you push your body a lot, you find that you need excess salt, you need excess magnesium, and a lot of times you need to remember that insulin drives water. And when we drive water into the body, that means we change the fluid dynamics of the body. So that means we move where fluid is, whether it's in the extracellular or intracellular space. And so, for example, if we want to drive fluid into the muscle, it's very important to raise insulin. And so, of course, we can raise insulin with, high protein diet too, to a small extent. But of course, carbohydrates does it, so easily. So I'm going to see how far I can take this with the carnivore diet and how it feels in terms of, muscle function, how I feel in general overall. Up to now, I feel amazing. I have very good, I feel very sharp in the brain, and I feel that, my workouts are feeling great. I haven't lost any muscle mass, and I've lost some body fat already. So that's like a bonus. But another thing which I do different now compared to the past is that I really take care of my light environment. So I make sure that I wake up with the sunrise always. I eat a nutrient dense breakfast upon 30 minutes upon rising outside. I go outside upon the sunrise. I make sure I open my windows. Try to get grounded every day. I do cryotherapy, like in the sea right now. In Cyprus is actually quite cold in the sea. It's like 19 degrees Celsius, which doesn't sound that cold, but in Costa Rica, the sea was like almost 30 degrees Celsius. So it's like body temperature almost. So it feels like you're taking a warm bath. But when you go in the sea here, I do feel the tingles on the skin, and I feel like pins and needles. So clearly it's doing something, So I just spend quite a bit of time in there, doing cold exposure, because that is super important when we have less UV light in our environment. So that's something that I do as well. And at night, I always make sure that I block the blue light. That's something that I didn't do before. In the past, I used to stay up all night. I used to watch videos in bed. I used to eat ice cream in bed because it fit my macros, all this kind of stuff. So there is just so many things that I did against my biology. But because I was young, I could kind of get away with it. But the symptoms and the consequences over time accumulated to a point where I did start to feel like really crap. And that was mainly noticed when I lived in Finland, because I mainly believe the environment was the biggest trigger that it pushed my body to the point where I had to change, my circadian health and also my new nutrition habits as well.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned a few times there that the light and not working out in like fluorescent light gyms. Could you just unpack a bit why you don't think that's a good idea?
So, as I mentioned, it's the accumulative effect that it has on the body, right? So if you spend the majority of your day indoors on your phone, on your screens, you have a desk job, you're sitting in an office under fluorescent lighting, you're not protecting your eyes or your skin from that type of light. What it does is it triggers the body blue light, artificial blue lighting, which is considered white light, because most people don't even know what blue light is, right? So let's really simplify it for people. The modern day LEDs or fluorescent light bulbs is considered blue light, even though it doesn't look blue to the eye, but it is on the color spectrum if we use a spectrometer. And so what this does, it tells our body that it's solar noon. And what solar noon is meant to be only at one time of the day. It's a certain peak of the day when the sun is the highest in the sky and it's most perpendicular to the ground, which means that the UV is most likely going to be highest and blue light will be highest as well. And this is meant to create alertness and is meant to make us engaged with our environment and to make us focused. And from an ancestral point of view, this is actually a good thing, because this allows us to be focused and to go and hunt and gather our food and to be able to survive. But what happens when we have that light all day, from the morning that we wake up, we switch on the lights, to the moment that we go to bed? And even when we go to bed, there are some devices that are emitting, blue light, now with our modern technology, which are disrupting our sleep as well to a greater extent. And so what's happening with this is stressing the body, and it's creating this alert, high cortisol state the entire day. Well, obviously, creating hormones is a very energy costly process. And so then we are stealing energy away from producing the other hormones that are absolutely necessary, such as leptin, melatonin. Then you've got testosterone, you've got estrogen, pregnenolone. You've got all the different hormones, which are super important for your health, and especially melatonin, because when we disrupt our melatonin cycle, this is a huge problem. That means that our whole sleep is thrown off, and sleep wake cycle, and also we are not able to regenerate and repair cells. And in the night, when we sleep, when we go into deep sleep and we have high melatonin in our bloodstream, this is actually when the deep tissue repair is occurring. It's kind of like a cell cycling, washing machine kind of process that's going on. But if we are exposed to that blue light all the way up to bedtime, then we are basically not allowing that melatonin to be released when it should, before 12. So it should be released already around 10 o'clock around. So that means that we need to start preparing our body way earlier in the day for that moment where the melatonin is supposed to start to be released into the bloodstream. And so the timing of the release of the hormones is super important. And what influences the timing? The light environment. And the light environment is also, light is in part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And so on the electromagnetic spectrum, we also have the non-native electromagnetic fields. So those also act as light to the body. The body perceives it as light. We just cannot see those waves. So now the body is totally confused for that type of light because it's a very non-native type of frequency. And so now we are totally disrupting our body's, mechanism of what it should be doing at what time of the day. It makes us totally ungrounded and dysregulated in the coordination of when things should be happening inside of the body. So that's one of the consequences of working out in a blue lit gym, if the rest of your lifestyle, and also depending on the time that you go to the gym as well. So for example, if you go to the gym in the middle of the night, let's say 7, 8 o'clock, 8 p.m., this is a huge issue because, as I mentioned, you have to start prepping yourself as soon as sunset hits to not have any blue lights after sunset, because you want to allow the body to naturally release that melatonin when it should be releasing it. But if you are exposing yourself to that unnatural blue light and the non-native EMFs that exist in those environments due to all the Wi-Fi routers, then you've got everyone's cell phones around you. This is not only in gyms, right? This is also in airports, in malls, in anywhere where it's overcrowded and very modernized these days. It's like absolutely the worst place to be, or the best place to be if you want to get your energy stolen. So this is like what's happening on a cellular level. We are actually getting our energy robbed from us when we are under that type of light and close to those non-native electromagnetic fields. Whereas if we take ourselves outdoors under full spectrum light and we are grounded to the earth barefoot, whether that is in the sea or on grass or on sand, rock, whatever, that actually is an electron-rich environment. So we are getting all the energy given to us, which is allowing healing and regeneration to occur. And so these are the two biggest differences between the environments and why this can be, a problem. Another big thing that I see with training in a gym environment, it can be a risk factor, is the dehydration of tissues. And so, as we mentioned, it's not necessarily the gym, but it's the accumulation of that light and the non-native electromagnetic fields on the body. How much stress has the body endured until that moment? So injuries are way more prone or more likely to occur in an environment where it's dehydrating the tissues. And what dehydrates the tissues is blue light, because it doesn't allow us to produce mitochondrial water, because we actually disrupt the way that our body makes energy in the system, right? And so we're not able to make that infrared light from our mitochondria, which is what it does when it does cellular metabolism in general. When it tries to make ATP, that we make mitochondrial water and we make CO2 and light and infrared light. And so those processes kind of stop when we are exposed to non-native electromagnetic fields and the blue light. And so therefore our tissues now start to become dehydrated, even though we are drinking water. And we find that if we spend more time under that type of lighting, that actually we are more thirsty, and we need to ask ourselves why. And that's because our tissues are constantly being dehydrated, and the type of water that we drink is not the same that our body requires. So the water that your body makes is perfect, so that means it can use it readily straight away. But the water that we drink has to be transformed into the water that our body needs. So therefore we can never meet the body's demands fast enough. So we find ourselves pounding electrolytes, drinking a ton of water, and we are wondering why we are still thirsty. So yeah, those are the biggest keys that I see in training in that type of environment.
Yeah. And so you said melatonin, I think you said it's released before 10 p.m. Is that what you said?
Around 10 p.m. That's what they say. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that how many hours after sunset or going to sleep would that be?
So let's say that's why they say that you should sleep before 12, because like when you fall asleep around 10 or you go to bed even earlier than 10, then afterwards the melatonin is slowly fully in your system around 12 until 2 in the morning. So you're in that really deep sleep. So you'll probably notice that, if you ever wake up around 12 or 2 in the morning, you're really, really like drowsy, and you feel that everything is kind of like spinning around you, or you have this vertigo. Sometimes I have witnessed this myself, that if I have maybe delayed my circadian rhythm for whatever reason, and I wake up in the morning and my body hasn't gotten rid of that melatonin yet, and it hasn't risen my cortisol to shut down my melatonin, I feel like the whole room is spinning still, because there's so much melatonin still in my blood. So delaying the melatonin is a really huge thing. And this is why maybe some individuals might find that it's super hard to get out of bed in the morning, even if they get 8 hours sleep, because if their melatonin is pushed forward and their cortisol is not rising, that's not shutting off the melatonin. So you need to shut off the melatonin by raising cortisol. And that occurs with the absence of light in the morning, natural light. And natural morning light is a combination of blue and red, and that actually raises our cortisol gradually. And so this is actually what we want, because this is going to shut off the melatonin, and it's this beautiful cycle where cortisol gradually rises throughout the day and kind of like peaks towards, mid-morning and lunchtime, kind of like 12, 1 o'clock. And it's supposed to start declining after that. And so the most ideal time to actually exercise is meant to be in the mid-morning time, because you don't want it to be too early to spike your cortisol too quickly at a time when it shouldn't be too high. And you also don't want it to do it in the afternoon when your cortisol should be dropping down, because remember that exercise can be a stressor to the body. And I think that we need to define the difference between exercise and movement for people, because people confuse these two things. Movement is something that doesn't necessarily put stress on the body. It can be considered as walking, yoga, cycling, anything endurance which is not breaking down muscle. It's not requiring much effort, but you're still moving your body and it makes you feel good. This is considered as movement. And this is what I call a biological necessity. So that means that it's something that you need to do every single day if you want to be healthy, because this is responsible for moving all the tissues inside of your body to connect your breathing muscles and your breathing function with the rest of your body, your fluid dynamics, and get the fluids moving around your body as well. And not only that, we also create piezoelectricity through movement as well. So every time we move our muscles, we generate electrons. Electrons is what the body uses to make ATP. So it's our cellular currency. So by moving our body more, we actually generate energy. And this is why people say that when you exercise, you get energy. But this is wrong. When you move, you get energy. When you exercise, you get tired. The thing is that why do you get tired when you exercise? Exercise is considered something where you're doing an intentful, hard event. You are raising that natural dopamine by, training hard. And it's like basically like doing an ice bath. You are overexerting yourself. You're breaking down muscle. And so this is actually stealing energy from you, but in a pursuit to give you something more back. So this is what we need to see, that how much are we gaining versus how much are we losing? And we need to try and find that perfect balance. And this is where a lot of people find themselves constantly drained when they exercise, because they're not doing enough other things outside of exercise to increase that energy reserve, that body battery, which I like to call, so that you can have energy even when your exercise is over, your hard intensity exercise. But movement is a must. That's something that you can do every day. Exercise, you can do maybe 3-4 times per week. You don't need to overexert more than that. It's not necessary, but movement is a priority.
Yeah, with you saying there that people still feel fatigued after doing, well, even after, having a rest from exercise, that's probably because, their recovery is not very good, their diet's not very good, they're not, getting enough melatonin to get that restful sleep, and not getting enough red light, stuff like that. So when you said that, the melatonin's kind of in your blood from, 10 till 2, around that time, if someone stays up until, let's say, 3 a.m., then goes to sleep, are they getting basically no melatonin?
The thing is, the body is super intelligent. It always wants to save you. So it's always trying to work with you and never against you. So the body will actually release the melatonin, but way more delayed. And this is a huge issue. And this is why people have a super hard time waking up, right? If you've had a late night out and you have disrupted your melatonin completely, even the quality of your sleep will be totally ruined as well. If you are up until that time and you are in the presence of red light only, then possibly you can still release, cellular, because remember that the body can actually release cellular melatonin all day. It's just that the pineal melatonin is mainly released at nighttime. And so this is where, it allows us to go into that deep sleep, where every single cell in the body is emitting or creating. This is what I learned from Dr. Max Kulhane's podcast. He had a really great guest on where they were talking about how every single cell in the body is actually emitting melatonin, and how it wouldn't make sense that the body would need to wait until nighttime to make repair or cellular repair to happen, because we have so much damage occurring all the time on a daily basis. And now with exposure to blue lights and non-native EMFs, that's damaging the cells even faster. So melatonin now is even more important. And it turns out that sunlight, specifically infrared light, increases the body's capacity and capability to produce that melatonin. And so the cellular melatonin, the one that it makes during the daytime and all the time, basically 24/7. And then the pineal melatonin is least disrupted when we are not exposing ourselves to blue light after sunset. And of course, it's most ideal if you can mimic what the sun is doing. So always, if we want to have healthy circadian rhythms, we want to mimic the light environment indoors as it is outside, and to be exposed to natural light as much as possible, because we can never actually replace the sun. But if we have to be indoors because it's cold, or we are working or doing something, then we have to make sure that the indoor lighting is supportive to our biology, because we have actually not evolved to be around that type of light. The only light we've evolved to be around is firelight or sunlight or moonlight. And actually during those times, of the month, people didn't really sleep. And I'm sure there was some purpose, some universal purpose to this whole thing, right? Because we are not disconnected from the universe. We are all one, basically.
Yeah. When you said people didn't sleep, do you mean that people slept worse when there was a full moon? Because I think I've heard that before, but do you mean they just didn't sleep like at all? They stayed up for the...
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that if you live in alignment with nature and you were a hunter-gatherer and you lived in a tent, most likely you didn't have the best blackout curtains and blue blockers on. So that means that if it wasn't cloudy, there would be very, very bright moon. And then the moon is extremely blue. If you've ever been out on a full moon, which is like, with unobstructed with clouds, it illuminates the streets. So that for sure disrupts people's melatonin. But I've heard on Sarah Kleiner's podcast, do you know her?
Yeah.
Yeah, she talks something a little bit interestingly, about something what happens to women's cycles, and actually how, yeah, I don't remember exactly how it went, but she was saying that how it disrupts, the menstrual cycle. And I'm sure that it also does something to men too. And of course, it will disrupt our sleep as well. So for sure, that will impact us. It's just that whether we are outside exposed to it or not. And are we actually meant to be exposed to that light? Probably yes, because ancestrally, we would be outside all the time in a tent, living close to the fire. And we'd probably be, spending more of those times hanging around the fire instead of sleeping. And then probably the rest of the month would be maybe sleeping more when there is less light from the moon.
That's interesting. You said about it can disrupt the menstrual cycle, because I've heard that, I don't know how many, but like a fair amount of women do actually cycle with the moon, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that's very true actually, because my partner Tina, she also like goes with the moon cycle, and I believe the more your body is actually in tune with nature, so the more you ground, because what is grounding actually? It's like the Earth's natural electromagnetic field, and that is giving a signal to the body about the time of the year, the day of the year, like the temperature. It's giving us so much information about the season and where we are at in the year. And all of this is actually synchronizing the body with, obviously, because we're on a planet, we're synchronizing us with the rest of the planets, because it's silly to think that, that the moon cannot impact us, because obviously everything is electromagnetic. So how is everything floating around, in space? It's like electromagnetism. And the moon, when the moon moves, don't you also notice that the sea changes? The tide, like maybe goes in or goes out. The sea gets more wild or something like this when it's like a full moon or a new moon. So imagine what that is doing to the fluids inside of your body, because that is no different. Because I've noticed that in myself, that maybe when it's around full moon or new moon, I might find that I might be more irritable in my mood. I might actually find that I'm more calm in my mood. It might go both directions. I also find that I might accumulate more water under my skin, and actually I don't look as lean as I normally do. And so what is actually causing this? If I'm not changing my diet, if I'm not changing my exercise, it's clearly something bigger is controlling our biology, and that is electromagnetism. And this is why the work of Dr. Jack Kruse is so important, because what he's teaching and preaching is that electromagnetism comes first, then it controls every single biochemical process in the body. Because imagine if everything had to rely on biochemical processes, it would be too slow. Things wouldn't happen fast enough. It wouldn't happen at the speed of light. And what is light? It's electromagnetism.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You're saying about you notice depending on the moon how you kind of feel and act. Maybe I've not heard that before. That is interesting. Yeah. Bringing it back to melatonin, you mentioned like cellular melatonin. I believe melatonin's over 1 billion years old, and it was first an actual antioxidant. It was not a timing hormone until later on. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense that
Yeah.
the cells are producing it like, throughout the day.
Yeah, it's kind of like a super antioxidant, right? So it's kind of like
Hmm.
scavenging all that oxidative stress that we are going through. And I believe Dr. Jack Kruse says that oxidative stress to some extent is actually a positive thing, but because it allows us to trigger this response in the melatonin production, which is, that's why it kind of goes hand in hand in a way where it is supportive to have some oxidative stress, but I don't believe it is the type of oxidative stress from the modern day living that it should be encountering. It should be just natural bodily processes just existing, because we are slowly dying all the time, right? Until we reach a certain point. It's just whether how fast we get there and the quality of life until we get there. And because our cells are constantly, aging and that and dying, we are obviously, all the processes in the body are becoming less efficient. And so we're making less energy, we're creating more oxidative stress. So that melatonin is now becoming even more important as we age.
Yeah, for sure. I'm aware that you have a BSc, Bachelor of Science in Nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of how much of the stuff that you learned from that do you still apply today, and what parts of it do you no longer agree with or believe?
That's a really good question, and it's one of those questions where it's very hard to accept and to answer, because I find that many people find the same thing who go the decentralized route of in terms of medicine, coaching, or any kind of business. To decentralize yourself, to separate yourself from the centralized systems, because that's what universities are. They are centralized places who are funded by pharmaceutical industries and companies. So the information that we receive is obviously very much focused on, low fat, high carbohydrate, no salt. Of course, they say that, you shouldn't consume that many sugars, but they still tell you to eat high carbohydrate, which is eventually going to turn into glucose anyway. So it's just the irony, that what they teach us is now what I'm teaching is the exact opposite, what I'm teaching and preaching. And I have found that my clients and myself, I am thriving because of that. And when I followed their paradigm and eating low fat and high carbohydrate and moderate protein, they suggested, but I always went against the grain on that because I was more focused on bodybuilding and building muscle. Um, they basically that basically leads to, diabetes, obesity, fat gain if you consume that type of diet, because you're not actually giving your body what it actually needs, and carbohydrates are non-essential. You've got like essential fats and you've got essential proteins, but you don't have essential carbohydrates, because your body actually can make glucose from fats and proteins as well. And it can run on ketones too. So the body actually doesn't require carbohydrates at all to be able to function. And this is how we survive as hunter-gatherers. And, we made it until this day right now. It's just that now we have an abundant food supply, which is 95% based on refined carbohydrates and processed seed oils. And this is a huge issue because now it's a huge distraction to what is the reality and what is real food. And now we are having this battle now, in the online world and in the physical world, where what is the optimal diet for a human? And well, what I tell people is just look back what your ancestors ate. What did your hunter-gatherers eat? They obviously hunted and gathered their own food. They survived by eating plant foods, and they thrived by eating animal foods. So what does that mean? It means that animal foods, which is high in protein and high in fat, allows the body to thrive. It supports your muscle, it supports your hormones, it supports you gaining weight, because you actually want to gain weight if you are a hunter-gatherer, because otherwise you are going to die if you basically don't have excess fat when you are having to fast, when you don't have food. So when you are eating plants, however, that is also making us gain weight but it's more of a survival food, and it's more something just to give us calories to be able to survive. But it doesn't necessarily have something that animal-based food doesn't have. And so this is where the mental confusion exists, that we believe that we need to have fruits and vegetables to be healthy. But in reality, the whole diet should be focused around healthy, animal meats and healthy animal fats. And obviously, seed oils are out of the question because that is even not human food. And most of the foods these days that you find on shelves are not fit for human consumption because they have been made in a factory. And so that means that it didn't even come from a food source to even begin with. It was just totally, manufactured like that. And especially now where we're going with lab-grown meat as well, it's a huge issue in the world. So yeah, now my coaching style and the way that I view nutrition is completely 180 degrees. And I use my degrees as a tool to be able to educate people and to reach more people. Because I acknowledge that having some certain degrees gives you a level of authority and a voice. If I wanted, I could have pursued and gone, and done like a PhD, so I can have even more of a voice. I just found studying so brutal on my physiology because of being in universities, being on a laptop all the time, sitting so many hours and doing my thesis and doing my studies. And so I found it such a pain in the ass that I thought I can't study now for many years. When I feel ready, maybe I'll do something, more to specialize in some area, even further down the line. But this is what I use my studies now. And surprisingly, for you to hear, probably will be that my movement science degree, which is my master's degree, that is also very centralized and very surgery focused, very artificial intelligence focused, very robotic focused, very pill and needle focused. It is not so much about telling people to move more and to be healthy. It is about trying to find quick fixes to allow people to carry on with their lives without actually fixing the root cause, which is probably some movement dysfunction, or giving them corrective exercises, or these kind of real tools that allows people to be truly healthy and treating the root cause of the problem.
Yeah, interesting. Did you get told don't let people bend their knees past their toes or over their toes?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what happens, and that it's so hilarious when you do that, because if you try that and I try that, I actually get the most amount of knee pain, because when you load the knee at 90 degrees, you fold your knee towards 90 degrees, parallel to the ground, your bum is parallel to the ground. What happens is you have the most amount of stress on the knee at that moment. But when your hips sink below the knees and they are now touching your heels almost, or even touching the back of your calves, what is happening is the load has slid backwards towards the hip area. So now the hips are being used in the bottom part of the motion to get you towards the halfway range. And then the quadricep muscles are now coming in to push you up on the top half range. So if you want to be quadricep dominant, do half squats. If you want to train your whole legs, do the whole squat.
Yeah. It's just, are you aware of the Athletic Truth Group, ATG, and the knees over toes guy?
Absolutely. I'm all about that, actually.
Yeah. I found out about those guys a few years ago, and it made a lot of sense, because just telling people to completely avoid a range of motion, it's just going to get weaker and weaker. Your body's going to think you're not using it anymore. So from my understanding, it doesn't, travel as many nutrients to that kind of joint.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just wild. So what do you think about prolonged jogging? Because I've heard some people say that it's not really that natural. A lot of people go out for these, they call them runs, but they're kind of just jogging for a long time, and it's quite painful for a lot of people. They really don't like doing it, and I think the footwear that most people have will also potentially play into that. But
We can get into that, yeah.
yeah, I've heard that kind of more, I guess, naturally we would be walking for long periods of time and then suddenly like
Yeah.
sprinting. What's your thoughts on that?
I do think that long distance running has its purpose because actually one good thing that I learned in movement sciences was that they taught us that human is the most efficient mammal in terms of, locomotion. So that means that we can move from A to B in the most efficient way possible. And that is because of our body structure. And actually, our body is designed to walk and run. So anybody who says that running is not for me, well, that means you're not appreciating your ancestral self, your ancestral body. Because the thing is that there is always a way to be able to train yourself into running. But I believe that running has its purpose because this is how tribes got from one area to another in an efficient way, and because if they had to do it, avoiding darkness and they wanted to get there in light hours, let's say they started in the morning and get there before sunset, they would have to do this steady state running, which would not be sprinting and it would not be walking, but it's the most efficient form of human movement where when you get into it, you get into this flow state and you're not actually using muscle. And this is where it goes wrong because people don't know how to run. And that's a fact. I see that all the time. Not only is the footwear a problem, but the technique of running is a problem. If you look at tribes who are still, existing in Africa or other areas of the world, and you look at them jump and run, they have an incredible ability to recoil their tendons and tissues. And what does that mean? That means that they are using elastic energy in their tendons and ligaments, not from their muscle, from their tendons and ligaments. Of course, it's all working together as one unit, but they are primarily using their tendons and ligaments to make that movement happen. So they put a bit of energy to get the movement started, but once the movement is going, it's a very efficient form of movement. So that means that if you do it right and you are loading the tendons and the ligaments correctly, you will get a return back way greater than what you put in. And so that means that it costs me less energy to keep on going. But stopping and starting is way more energy costly. That's why we love sprinting for fat loss, because it uses so much energy to stop and start fast. To do that, it takes a ton of energy. You use up so much stored glucose. If you use the stored up glucose now and you don't have glucose in your system, you're going to tap into your own body fat stores. So this is why sprinting is incredible. But long distance running done at the right pace with the right technique and the right intensity and for the right reasons with the right footwear can be the best thing that you can do, because it can be incredible for your mitochondria to allow your body to tap into, ketosis. Because when you are in aerobic metabolism, that is when you are in ketosis. When you are in anaerobic metabolism, that is when you are using glucose as fuel. And so this is basically like the two types of metabolisms that exist. And people argue that, you can't just simply say that when you're doing running, it's aerobic, and when you're not running or when you're sprinting or lifting weights, it's anaerobic, because the body, it would make sense that those two metabolisms run at the same time, but it's just which one are you using more, depending on where you're putting your focus. But this is a very interesting topic. It's something that really interests me, and I'm all the time learning more and more about. But it's, I think, one which is very important for us to understand, because it allows us to understand what type of fuel source are we getting into. This is why people say that walking is actually very good for fat loss, because it allows you to be in the aerobic metabolism. But as soon as you go over, you raise your heart rate over a certain amount, or you start almost fatiguing your muscles now, and you're breaking muscle down, you're now tapping into anaerobic metabolism, and that's when you start to feel your muscles slowing down, fatiguing, they're getting sore, you're building that lactic acid in the muscle. And so that's basically what the anaerobic metabolism is. And if you get that without doing something hard, that means that your mitochondria are not efficient at making energy.
Yeah, okay. So aerobic respiration is respiration in the presence of oxygen. I
Yeah.
got taught quite a few years ago now, probably, but that aerobic respiration is glucose and oxygen makes carbon dioxide, water, and ATP, and
Hmm.
that anaerobic is glucose makes lactic acid and ATP. So
Hmm.
you said that aerobic kind of uses you get into ketosis. Can you kind of explain that?
Yeah, so exactly what you just mentioned, like it really depends on your diet as well, right? So of course, if you have like stored glucose in your muscles, your body's gonna use that first, ideally. But when you're not pushing your body like in overdrive, because it has got to do a lot with the hormones as well during exercise. So when you really push your body, you're gonna raise your cortisol as well. When you raise cortisol, you're gonna raise insulin, and so all of this kind of stuff you're going to utilize. You're going to pump glucose, your blood sugar is going to raise basically when you raise your cortisol, when you do something very, very hard. But when you are doing something that's easier, you're going to allow the body to stay in ketosis. So that means if you're already in ketosis. So if you're not, then of course you're going to have to use up that glucose that you have stored first before you tap into. This is why I said that it's possible to be in two metabolisms at the same time and switch kind of, which one is being used more than the other. So it's more like a ratio kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I thought I was probably have not been given the whole story on metabolism, considering what I was probably taught that, oh yeah, you need to have carbohydrates for energy or whatever. The people who were telling me that.
Yeah, and in
So
the presence of oxygen, that's when beta oxidation occurs, right? You need oxygen for fat utilization to occur. And what is fat utilization? Obviously, it's ketosis.
ketosis.
And so when you don't have oxygen, when you do anaerobic exercise, anaerobic means that you are using up more oxygen that you can supply your cells. And so what does that cause? That causes an anaerobic environment. And so that means we don't have oxygen. So that means that now we have to use the other pathways.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So you talked earlier about you were quite into bodybuilding,
Yeah.
and I know Jack Kruse has talked about that having really big muscles is not necessarily the best, but he says if you work outside, it's probably fine. Is that a thing you
Yeah.
think about, that like you don't want to get overly muscularly developed?
Thank you for bringing this up because this is something that I actually have been battling with in my mind, and I have been having certain opinions about which I have been wanting to share with the world. So I really appreciate you asking this question. Um, I do believe that attaining a certain amount of muscle is extremely important, especially as we age. Why? Because as we age, we are starting to lose our function in general as human beings. We are not able to lifting weights because we stop exercising. And when we stop doing the hard things, we can't do hard things anymore, or it's way harder to get into doing hard things. And so, of course, having maybe too much muscle is probably not a good thing because, as he mentions, it steals mitochondria away from the heart and the brain. However, if someone is not using anabolic steroids, if someone is natural, how much muscle do you think a person is able to attain naturally until they get into an old age? I don't think that much. Their body will naturally,
Yeah.
instinctively, anyway, start to catabolize. This is what happens as we age. We start to catabolize in general. So we have muscle wasting as we age because of our hormones, sarcopenia. And so even if you exercise as hard as you can until you die, basically, and you basically have a Greek god physique even when you die, the thing is that how much harm does that actually do for you? Isn't it like, think about how much harm it does to attain more fat than you actually need on your body. I think about it, that is more harmful than having more muscle. So I compare those two things together. When Dr. Jack Kruse makes those statements and those claims, he never says what is an ideal amount of muscle. And that bothers me a lot, because don't make a statement without giving a direction, because it's like telling people that it's okay to be fat when you're old. And I don't think that is okay, because the thing is that to be slim, so let's say if you don't have muscle, but you basically don't have a belly, that's way better off than someone who is, obese. And just because they have a good light environment, that also doesn't mean they can eat whatever they want, because that's something else that he has mentioned on previous podcasts, that if you have your light environment right, you can eat whatever you want and get away with it. And that's absolutely not the truth, because my whole coaching in general relies around, making sure that people are eating the right portion sizes, where they're eating those meals in the correct light environment. Of course, I'm all about Dr. Jack Kruse's work, and I'm one of his biggest proponents actually of his work and bringing it into people's awareness. But I don't appreciate the fact that he mentions, that he tells people that we shouldn't be building our muscles, because come on, like not everybody has the knowledge to build the muscle, number one. Number two, it's extremely hard to build and maintain muscle if you are not putting like a constant effort behind it. And if you are not eating the right type of diet, you will neither attain the muscle. And if your circadian rhythms are not right, you will neither attain the muscle that you want. So there are so many factors that are influencing how much muscle you have, that telling people to not have muscle is a very dangerous thing, because what we want is actually to get people healthy. We don't want to tell people that it's okay to be fat. And so my opinion on this is that people should be moving their bodies throughout their whole lifetime. That is like number one. That, of course, you can do outside, right? And then if you are exercising, and because he says it's okay to exercise outdoors, well, what if it's like a outdoor gym where they have machines and weights? Is he okay with that? He doesn't specify that, He says that, for example, the work of Erwan Lecour and Ido Portal, who do more natural type of movement, which I am very aware of because I teach and preach a lot of that stuff. And the reason why I teach and preach it is because it does enhance the body's functions. It does allow your body to work together as one unit and not as isolated segments, and allows you to, to be more capable in life. However, it doesn't allow you to build so much muscle. And that's the truth, because isolation training and resistance training allows you to isolate muscles very effectively and allows you to build an area of the body which you want to highlight. So if you, for example, want to grow bigger arms, you can focus on bicep curls and tricep extensions. If you want to grow your chest, you can do bench press, But if you do something like Ido Portal, Erwan Lecour, it's more focused on function of the body. It's not focused on size. So there is where the difference lies. Do I believe that both are important? Yes, both are very important, because one is giving you the muscle, which is giving you the strength and the power, which is super important. And the other one is giving you the function. And so if you add all of those things together, you can be a functional beast. So that means that you can be capable, strong, powerful, functional, fast, athletic. You can have it all. There is no reason why you need to do only one thing. And this is what happens in the fitness industry. There is this huge divide with like, this training method is the best. This training method is the best. I think all training methods are the best, because if you take and pick a little bit from everything and you incorporate it into your, weekly training routine, you can become the best version of yourself, no matter what someone is trying to sell you.
Yeah, I think you made some good points there. In my podcast with Jack Kruse, he did say, if you're going to lift heavy things, do it outside in the sun. And he was talking about the guys in Venice Beach. So I think he is okay with lifting weights outside up to some point. I wonder if it's more the fact of where people are doing the resistance training. So if they're doing resistance training inside under blue light,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
the bigger issue is actually the light environment, not really the actual exercise itself. But
Yeah.
I think it is a good point that you said. I think most people are probably on the under muscle side than over muscled. So if we say like,
Yeah.
okay, you don't want to hypertrophy your muscles too much. Well, for most people who are overweight and probably they don't have very much muscle at all, that's probably not particularly useful advice. But yeah,
Yeah, exactly. But let's give people like a bit of a scenario, a bit of a situation. So, for example, something that would be very interesting to me, is it okay, for example, if someone spends the majority of their time ancestrally appropriate or circadian appropriate, and they spend the majority of their time outdoors? So that means they wake up in the morning, they go outside, they spend the majority of their time outside. So let's say the majority of their lifestyle is an outdoor lifestyle. And for 1 hour, they go in a gym. How much of a problem is that, do you think? To be honest, I wouldn't put too much weight on that, especially how much benefit that you will get from doing that resistance training, even if it's in a unhealthy environment. So what I do is give people solutions. I don't tell people to avoid the gyms. I tell people cover up as much as you can with your skin, wear long clothing, and wear blue light blocking glasses. And I think that you can still get a ton of benefit from training in a gym, but just make sure that the rest of your life, which is what I also teach and preach, lifestyle practices, I tell people to spend more time outdoors. I tell people to wake up with the sunrise. I tell people to block blue light after sunset. I tell people to turn their Wi-Fi off and not be close to electromagnetic fields. So all of these things, if you're doing them, I don't think that training in a gym for that 1 hour is so much of a huge issue. It's just more about of this accumulative process, which I keep on hammering away, because it's not just the light. It's not just the EMFs. We have now these days more toxins than ever. We have these environmental pollutants. We have the toxic cleaning products. We have the air fresheners. We have toxic clothing. We have so many things that if you add them on top of each other, which one is that one thing that's going to overflow your bucket? This is what you need to ask yourself. And it doesn't matter which one it is, because what you need to start doing is start emptying your bucket as fast as you can by reducing those things from your life, eliminating those environmental toxins, turning off your Wi-Fi, turning off your blue light, putting red light at night. You want to do all of these practices because it's a pyramid, right? Health is a pyramid. You want to stack all these different areas of life together. Everything is important. Circadian rhythms are important. Nutrition is important. Exercise and movement is important. All of these areas are important. And if we don't have all of them together, I don't think that we can be healthy. So even if we take care of our circadian rhythms and we eat like crap and not exercise, we are still not going to be healthy, even if we take care of our circadian rhythms. So the thing is that we need to make sure that the other areas are also addressed. We can't be kidding ourselves that focusing on one thing is going to fix everything. It's like saying that exercise can make you lose fat. Of course not. I mean, exercise, it just accelerates your metabolic rate. That's all it does. Without the help of the nutrition, without the aid of the circadian rhythms, without reducing your toxins from your environment, which are loading your lymphatic system, you are not going to lose weight, So we have to have everything together, support our hormonal health from a circadian standpoint, because that's what it does. That's what circadian rhythms are so important for, optimizing hormones. And that's what we realize, right? If we want to be, let's say, enhanced, almost taking steroids without taking steroids, that's why you take care of your circadian rhythms, because that's what it does to you. That's what the cold exposure does to you. That's what eating high saturated fat does to you, high protein diet, So all of these things together makes you very optimal and ideal human being.
Yeah, I agree for sure that it's definitely multifactorial and that you do need to look at multiple areas and kind of dial them all in a bit, at least a bit. Yeah, lots of good stuff there. I think to round up, could you talk a little bit about what your current routine is for each day?
Mm-hmm. So in terms of which area of life?
Just from when you get up to when you go to sleep.
Okay, so kind of like a physical. So what I do is first thing is just wake up with the sunrise. I open my window and I go out on my balcony and I stare towards the sky, towards the sunrise. I don't stare directly at the sun, obviously. I mean, some ancient cultures did that. I mean, I would do it, but I just won't tell people to do it. And so that is giving my body the light signals that it actually needs to process, and to ensure that the hormones are going to be released at the right time of the day, because that's what we're doing, right? We're programming our body literally through the light signals of what it's going to do for the rest of the day. So it sets the tone for the day. So that's number one. Get outside and stare at the sky for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Then I go inside and I cook my breakfast, which is typically 10 eggs with whole eggs with butter on top and salt. And then again, I go outside and I eat that meal. Once I've done that, I go to the toilet and I take a royal, and then I then go and do some cold exposure in the sea straight after that. So I try to spend as much time there as I can, because that is also my grounding at the same time. Because here in Cyprus, we don't have so much greenery around. We have a lot of concrete. It's very built. However, we have a lot of sea. So I embrace the nature in that aspect. So I go to the sea a lot, and I live exactly by the sea. I'm basically 50 meters by the sea. So I just literally walk there with my trunks. I go there, dip in the sea, do my cold exposure. I get the sun at the same time. So I'm getting so many benefits at the same time. Cold, grounding, get the sunlight. There's just such good benefits from doing that. And that makes me feel alive. I come back inside. I then now begin to organize my day. So what I start to do is I start to write down, or if I've written from the night before, all the things that I want to execute throughout the day, whether that is my coaching or some social media post or writing some blog post or YouTube or whatever, because I am a very big content creator as well. And because of that, I have to make sure that I do take care of my circadian rhythms and I do take care of my EMF environment, because I do feel like shit after using my phone for 1 hour. Even if I use it outside on my balcony under the open sky, I still feel like crap, because I believe it's the narrow view that it gives to the eyes, because you're not getting that, that long distance in the horizon, and it's narrowing your view down. It's putting you more into a sympathetic state. You've got, of course, EMFs, being released from the phone. I don't wear blue light blocking glasses outside, because when you get the exposure to the natural light, there's no need to block the blue light. This is why I tell people to open windows if they're working indoors, or, to not use basically blue light at all if they're indoors. They try and put like orange incandescent lighting. As you can see now in my environment, my lights are red, right? That's because I put them on before we started the podcast. And now it's getting darker outside. So now I'm sitting with my window open. But now, because it's getting darker, you can see the red. So now my body is now slowly being prepared for the evening hours. So midday, we have lunchtime, again, another 10 eggs. And then maybe sometimes some form of cheese. And then I do my training in very early afternoon. So I would do it, around 1 or 2 p.m. or something like that. I find that mornings for me are the most productive time for my brain. And this is why I do the majority of my online work and my coaching in the morning. Just a second, let me have a sip of water.
So is that part of the routine as well?
You mean, well, actually, I don't drink that much water because when you understand that the body makes like mitochondrial water, you actually want to make as much as that water as possible, and you can only do that through a ketogenic style diet. And that's exactly what carnivore diet is, that when you're eating carbohydrates, you are not making as much mitochondrial water. And this is exactly why I love the carnivore diet because a high fat diet allows you to make more ATP from the fat because that's what fat does. It gives you more energy than carbs per gram, and also it makes you more mitochondrial water. So that means it's more hydrating to the body. So actually, my water is quite minimal. The only reason I needed to drink water is because it feels like the throat gets very dry from talking. Because when do we ever talk like so many minutes consecutively? It's quite rare, really, in daily life. So it's your throat doesn't really get used to it. So I try to drink filtered water and add a pinch of sea salt in it, because when you filter it, of course, depending what the type of filtration you use, you will remove all the minerals, and your body requires minerals so you can suck the water. Otherwise, the water is going to go straight through you and it's going to strip minerals from your body. And that is actually potentially harmful as well, because then you will be depleting your body with certain minerals if you are not replenishing with electrolytes or eating foods that have electrolytes, or you are not like adding salt to your water. And so, yeah, salt is a big part of my diet in general, because I find that when I don't consume carbohydrates, I I find that I'm not carrying as much water on my body. And so therefore, like I feel that also my body needs more salt to be able to retain a little bit more water as well. And so, yeah, like that's what I do. And then my afternoon time, I start to wind down a little bit. I have some general rules with myself that I do not look at my phone after sunset. So I put my phone down. Like even if I have important messages, I don't answer them. I put my phone on flight mode. I turn off the Wi-Fi. I make sure that all my lighting in the house is red. I wear my red blue light blocking glasses after the sun has set, because the yellow ones are not blocking enough of the blue. If I have to look at something, or if I have some lights in the house which are not, the light bulbs are not switched to red. I have red light bulbs everywhere, but there is some of them that you can't replace them all. Sometimes you need like some regular lights. So I wear the red glasses in the case that I need to be exposed, or if I need to go outside and take the trash or something on the street, all the lights are LED lights now, so they're all toxic blue. So we need to protect ourselves at all costs. Otherwise, we might be doing everything else right, but then we might just disrupt our melatonin at the last second before we go to bed because we took the trash out. We're exposed to that blue light from the street lights. So yeah, that's kind of like my nighttime routine. I kind of prep myself. I do all that. I eat my last meal as well with the sunset. So right now I'm compromising for this podcast. So I would normally eat like maybe 1 hour ago. So then basically right now it's just about getting, it's not fully dark yet. So that means that the sun is a little bit there, but it's fully set. So there's still light in the environment. And why I want to do that is because I want to intermittent fast the correct way around. So I want to intermittent fast from the evening time to the morning time, because that is more supportive for my biology and my hormones, versus fasting from the morning or from the night and then until the next lunchtime, like a lot of people do, when they do 16-8 fast, 16 hours fasting and 8 hours eating window. So I fast like in that kind of way. And so then my nighttime routine, of course, I always have movement involved in my day, which I didn't mention. So I'm moving all the time. I have a bit of a mobility routine that I do every morning as soon as I wake up, and as soon as just before I go to bed, I do this mobility routine. It just makes sure that my joints feel nice and loosey-goosey before going to bed, because if you go to bed stiff, expect that you're going to wake up stiff. Sleep is not some kind of like magic, like reset, like quick fix button. You need to make sure that you're taking care every aspect of your life. And then actually that will improve your sleep too, because if you're not stiff when you sleep, the quality of your sleep improves massively. So if you don't feel like you have aches and pains, or if you feel like you're nice and relaxed in your body and the fluids are moving nicely, and you feel like your breathing is good, and that your nose breathing, because that's one thing that I'm very big into, is nose breathing. And I basically breathe through my nose throughout the entire day. I'm very conscious about it. I've made it like a rule now for so many years, like at least 5 years I've been breathing through my nose. In the nighttime, it's a habit that I breathe through my nose, but sometimes I catch myself, breathing through my mouth. So as soon as I catch myself, I shut my mouth immediately. So it's something I'm not a big fan of mouth taping, for the reason being that you're not addressing the root cause, and the root cause is the daytime. And so you need to actually train your body constantly throughout the day. Remind yourself that this is important. Put your tongue on the roof of your mouth, breathe through the nose. Do that as much as you can. Condition your body to breathe through the nose, because you actually increase your oxygen uptake and you balance your carbon dioxide ratio in your body, which allows more oxygen to reach your cells, which means that your mitochondria work more efficiently. So here's another reason why we should be nose breathing. And you increase your fat utilization, because remember, beta oxidation requires oxygen. So you need to like always keep these things in mind. And yeah, so that's kind of like my routine. It's kind of it's simple, but it's very effective.
Yes, sounds good. And just quickly, I'll add, I heard this thing that was quite funny. For anyone who kind of doubts nose breathing, like, well, why should you bother doing that? Well, you can't eat through your nose, okay? You can eat through your mouth, and you can't eat through your nose. So what else is your nose there for apart from breathing?
Exactly. That's a very true statement. And you know that mouth breathing is there for a reason. I like to see that nose and mouth like gears of the nervous system. So nose will most of the time have you in a social engagement like state or parasympathetic state. Social engagement means that when you are in a parasympathetic state, where you are socially engaged. So you are focused, but you are still very relaxed. But if you mouth breathe, that automatically puts you in a sympathetic state. So that is fight and flight. So if you do that now, you are more likely upper chest breathing, because the breath is not going deep to the bottom of the lungs when you mouth breathe. And so when you nose breathe, it goes to the bottom of the lungs. It activates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is one of your cranial nerves, which passes from the side here of your neck behind the ear and goes all the way down, attaches to your lungs, attaches to your heart, and attaches to your gut. So the gut movement actually relies on your breathing, because the diaphragm can only move when your lungs move, and they can only move really when you inflate them fully. But that doesn't mean that you need to be taking long, deep breaths. It's just more so that every so often it's good to, move the diaphragm purposeful in this way, where you are filling your belly with air. So you think about pushing your belly out in a way with your lungs, because this is massaging your organs, because your organs are actually meant to move a ton. And so every time you move your body in terms of movement and exercise, and you jump up and down, your organs are moving inside. This is amazing. Your organs love that. They get oxygen, they get blood flow, they get nutrients. And the same thing, your lymphatic system, which is your primary or your detoxification aid system, which takes that fluid to your detoxification organs, your kidneys and your liver, then can only move if you are moving, and if you are breathing, and if you are stimulating your lymphatic system points, which is another big rabbit hole that we probably shouldn't get into, because that deserves a full podcast in itself.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. We should definitely do another one at some point, because there's definitely a lot more to get into. Where can people find out more of your stuff? I know you've got a website, Instagram, YouTube, and anywhere else.
So people can find me on Instagram. You can get a lot of good free information on there, free tips. And, I share a lot of movement inspiration on there. I share a lot of good advice in terms of, circadian rhythms, habits, lifestyle habits, and so on, and try to make educational content for people, so people can start basically immediately if they visit my page, even without taking my services. So my page on Instagram is Andreas_David_Christou. My YouTube channel is Movement Specialist Andreas, altogether. And I do have a website as well, which is where you can find all of my services, where I offer movement coaching, gym workout programming, and nutrition coaching and lifestyle optimization. I do have a circadian reset coaching as well, which is for people who are interested in focusing. They have the other areas of their life dialed in already, and they want to focus on their circadian rhythms, because I believe there is a demand in the world and there is a necessity. So I want to be able to help people in this area because I feel like I have a very good grasp on this topic. And so my website is mobility-fitness.com. And so you can just reach out to me on there, send me an email if you want to do a free consultation and get to know me better.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put the links to all of that in the description of this episode. Thanks, Andreas. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Owen. It was a pleasure.
Goodbye.